Who are the most underrated teams in the NFL entering 2024? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch back here with another NFL video. And in this video, I give you my 8 most underrated NFL teams entering the 2024 NFL season. These are the teams that are being overlooked or just flat out disrespected entering the 2024 NFL season. If that sounds good, don't forget to spike the damn like button. If we get 100 likes on this video, I will provide my most overrated NFL teams entering this season. Hop in the comments and let me know if you agree with my list. This doesn't necessarily mean I think these teams are going to win the Super Bowl or go to the AFC Championship or even make the playoffs, but I just feel that these teams could genuinely shock fans. These teams could outdo and exceed expectations for what people think they will actually become in 2024. So without further ado, let's begin with perhaps the most disrespected team in the NFL right now, and that is the Buffalo Bills. Yes, the Buffalo Bills. Everybody, I'm saying everybody, thinks this team is going to take a step back. But what if they don't? What if the Buffalo Bills actually have a season like the Chiefs just had, where everybody's ruling them out? Everybody thinks they don't have the receiver talent. Everybody thinks these past couple of years, right? Kansas City, they're not the same. They don't have Tyreek Hill. What are they going to do? Their receivers, they can't catch. What if the Buffalo Bills getting rid of Stephon Diggs actually leads to the most successful Josh Allen Buffalo Bills teams that we've ever seen? I'm throwing that out there for you. Now, I genuinely do believe that this team is going to be good. Now, I wonder how good they're going to be. But what I'm flat out disgusted with is the lack of respect for this team. First of all, they have Josh Allen on the team. That's like automatic 9, 10, 11 wins. Automatic. I don't even have to look at the schedule. You can blindfold me, bro. I don't need to look at it. When you have number 17 on your team, the biggest one-man show in the NFL, you don't need much else to get 10 wins. I'm just not going to lie. I mean, take it from a Brady fan, okay? And I'm not saying Josh Allen is Tom Brady, but what I am saying is when you have a Tom Brady, when you have a Peyton Manning, when you have a Patrick Mahomes, when you have a Lamar Jackson, when you have a Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, when you have one of these elite players in their prime, they are winning 10 games. And there are people out there that think they might not win the division. There are people out there that think they might miss the playoffs. And to me, unless the New York Jets go out there and put all the pieces together that they could possibly put together, which might be a little bit of foreshadowing for this video, right? Unless that happens, I am putting all of my money, shove it into the middle of the table, because I'm gambling it on Josh Allen and the Bills to win the division. And let's just go past Josh Allen for a second, because I think we all understand they have number 17. But what else do they have? And that's what people are kind of critiquing. I just think genuinely this roster is underrated, leading again to the underrated, undervalued, overlooked, disrespected team that they are. First of all, they had a strong running game late last season. This was a team that was not driven by their passing game. This was a team that was not a spread and shred approach. This was a team that was run the ball, play action. Josh Allen's going to scramble around and make a few plays outside structure. He's going to run, right? James Cook's going to catch the ball 7 times a game. They're going to throw it to their tight ends. And yeah, Stephon Diggs was there, maybe as their one or their number one receiver. But if you actually look at his production last year, especially in those final 8 games of the regular season and in the playoffs, he was averaging like 9 yards a catch. He didn't even have like 400 yards in 8 games. He didn't even have 2 touchdowns in 8 games. He had 1. I mean, so like, yeah, Stephon Diggs is gone, but let's actually look at the depth of the roster, the depth of the offense now. The skill positions are greater. They're deeper, right? They added a first-round receiver, basically, the 33rd pick in the draft. They feel Keon Coleman can give them a complement to their receiving core. They added a first-round tight end last year in Dalton Kincaid, who had a nice little rookie season. Right, just because Sam Laporta had a better one, don't overlook what Dalton Kincaid produced last year and expect him to produce even more in year 2, because typically tight ends take a little bit longer to break out, and year 2 should be a massive leap for Dalton Kincaid. A tight end that I think could catch 75-plus balls this season. Dawson Knox is a vertical tight end. He can get down the field in a hurry. He's a good athlete. He can create yards after catch. Khalil Shakir is one of the most underrated receivers in football. Curtis Samuel has never had a quarterback. I mean, never. Maybe Cam Newton for like a year. That's it. Curtis Samuel can play running back. He can play slot. He can play outside. He can fly. You can give him a handoff. He's a dangerous weapon. Right? Like, what are we talking about here? This team had Gabe Davis last year. Gabe Davis isn't any good. I'm sorry to give that information, to provide that to you. Gabe Davis is not very good. He's not. Okay? Chase Claypool, Mac Hollins, these big targets on the outside, one of them could work out to be just as productive as Gabe Davis. I mean, Chase Claypool certainly has more pure talent than Gabe Davis, and if he's motivated, Josh Allen could get the most out of him, because Claypool hasn't been any good since Ben Roethlisberger left. He hasn't had a good quarterback either. That's something to point out. Marcus Valdez-Scantling. This guy's been like one of the top receivers for the Chiefs and one of the more reliable receivers for the Chiefs, the back-to-back Super Bowl champs. So, I mean, that's a decent floor receiver for you. So, yeah, everyone's worried about their receiving core, but I would argue when you kind of get rid of the notion that Stephon Diggs was Stephon Diggs, and you actually look at the receiving core for what it is now, and then you add on to the layer of this offensive line is pretty solid. They can run the ball. Josh Allen can run it himself. They can run multi-tight end formations. They've got a lot more speed at receiver now. They've got more size at receiver now. They've got more depth. And you kind of look at, okay, now Joe Brady's going to have a full offseason to work with Allen and kind of figure out what's going to work for them this year, mold that offense. I think Brady's been an underrated coordinator throughout his NFL career in Carolina and Buffalo, and I thought he did a smooth job of taking over that operation last year. And you've got to realize that this was a team that was already phasing out Stephon Diggs. They're moving on in a different direction. And that direction could make them play more cohesive overall football. What could actually help Josh Allen play more mistake-free football and take less, allow him to have less on his shoulders, is what I'm trying to say. So then you go to the defense, where the Bills have always been very solid under Sean McDermott. I would say that you would have a point if you were to say this is one of the least talented Bills defenses on paper that we've seen in recent years. But that's the thing about the Bills defense. They've never really been about the individual talent. They've been about depth. They've been about cohesion. They've been about health. Last year it was about health, right? That's the reason they ultimately could not stop a nosebleed against Kansas City. Half their defense was hurt, and some of that was age, because a lot of these guys were getting older, and they were paying these guys some chunks of money that they were not worth. There's still one of those individuals on this team, but they've sort of flipped the script and gone a little bit younger and a little bit faster, and they've gone in a different direction with their defense subtly. I think. But there's still many of the fundamental pieces. First of all, they get back their best defensive player who missed a majority of last year, Matt Milano, who's one of the 5 best linebackers in the NFL. End conversation, okay? Yeah, they lost big names like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and Leonard Floyd and Tre'Davious White. But the only one I would actually argue is a big loss is Leonard Floyd. That's really it. Because Micah Hyde was not the same player, and he's still out there, I believe, as a free agent if they want to bring him back. Jordan Poyer was certainly not the same player. He can't really run anymore. And Tre'Davious White had multiple Achilles injuries and never really played for them the last couple of seasons. So people are looking at the names they've lost. Mitch Morse, Stephon Diggs, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. They're thinking about the last few years of the Bills, and they're being like, how could they ever recover? Well, let's face the facts that those players were not really the same at the end here. And a lot of this team was built off of, we have Josh Allen and he's just going to save us. He's Superman. Now I feel like they've still got Greg Rousseau, who's a really good player, their best pass rusher. Ed Oliver is a really good player, their best interior defensive lineman. They managed to keep Daquan Jones, who's a really good player for them. They signed up Austin Johnson, Dwayne Smoot, Deshaun Williams, solid veteran depth players for their defensive line. Dwayne Carter, I like that pick in the draft from Duke. Solid run defender at defensive tackle. AJ Epinesa, I think, is kind of underrated. Von Miller, will he be better than last year? He certainly can't be worse. You know, he's going to be a year removed from the major injury. He had 0 sacks last year. He had only 3 tackles in what? How many games? That's disgusting. I mean, talk about, he had some stuff going on off the field as well. So maybe he can get his head straight and maybe he could really bring them something in a rotation role. But even if he doesn't, I think they have enough here. Maybe not the same Bills D-line that they had a couple years ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago. But last year, it's not like they had much. And they were still, what? A kick away from tying the Super Bowl champs and taking it to overtime with half the defense. Because half the defense was hurt. Terrell Bernard is a good player. Dorian Williams, solid backup. Nicholas Moreau, nice pickup in free agency. Very solid backup. He played over 1,000 snaps for a playoff team last year in Philadelphia. Even Spector, I don't mind as a linebacker. But the secondary, I think, is a lot better than people talk about. Christian Benford's one of the most underrated players in the NFL, and I put him in my most underrated video, which, by the way, once we get 100 likes, I'll release my most overrated players in the NFL for every team. So make sure to like that video so that you can get that list. Rasul Douglas, stud. I mean, unreal last year. Teron Johnson, one of the best nickel corners since he's entered the NFL. Cole Bishop, love that draft pick. Taylor Rapp, I've always liked. Mike Edwards, I've always liked. He played really well for the champs last year. They picked up D. Delaney, who's kind of a hybrid safety corner. Never been the biggest fan, but he's played in a good defense for a long time in different spots. So I look at this team and I say, like, yeah, they don't have as many big names. They're not going to blow you away with that depth chart on paper. But they've got a solid offensive line. They'll be able to run the ball. They've got a dynamic running back who can run and catch the football. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the league. They've got a deep receiving core that has a plethora of different talents. They can attack you in different formations and different, schemes in terms of, okay, we could have 11 personnel, 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. We could go 12 personnel. We could hit you with all this different stuff now this season, and we don't have that distraction in the back of our minds of this one receiver saying, hey, I need the ball, guys. Like, give me the ball, Josh. Hey, we don't have that distraction anymore, and that might lead to a more cohesive, more together offense and team. Defensively, McDermott always has a solid defense. This is a unit that might start off a little bit rougher than expected, but will grow because they're going to be fundamentally sound and they're going to be very, very well coached. And I think they have a plethora of underrated players. They almost remind me of the Bengals defense, where they don't have any weaknesses, but they might not have any real strengths either. So I am just disgusted at how underrated and overlooked the Bills have become. I just think far too many people are not giving them their due, not giving them their credit. Like, they've won the division every single season since, 2020? Ever since Tom Brady left the division, Josh Allen and the Bills have won this division. And I think they deserve that credit. They've been one of the most consistent franchises and teams in the NFL since Sean McDermott got there. Even when Tom Brady was there, they were going to the playoffs. So, I mean, I just think the Bills have been really disrespected, and that's why they belong on this list. The next team that I think is underrated is the Indianapolis Colts. And this is one that I've had a tricky time dealing with the entire offseason. And if you've been following my content, you would know what I'm talking about. I think the Colts are one of those teams that are entirely dependent on what Anthony Richardson kind of becomes this year. Not necessarily in terms of does he become a superstar or not, but does he become a good starter and does he actually stay healthy? Because I don't think it's going to be like last year where Gardner Minshew can enter the fold and they're still kind of competing for a playoff spot. If Joe Flacco is playing at 40 years old, I don't necessarily see him replicating last season. So Richardson, you're going to have to stay healthy and you're going to have to be explosive. But I do see elements of the Colts where I could really start to believe. First of all, I love their head coach, Shane Steichen. I think he is a brilliant offensive mind. I think he proved that last year. And everywhere he's been, he's gotten the most out of his quarterback. When we're talking about Jalen Hurts in that Super Bowl season, when we're talking about Justin Herbert and his early years with the Chargers, and we're now talking about Anthony Richardson or Gardner Minshew, he provided really good offensive schemes in a different fashion. We never really got to see what the Anthony Richardson offense would be once Richardson gained some reps in the NFL. Will Richardson be kind of explosive but inconsistent? Perhaps. Maybe a little bit too inaccurate for some people. But I think that the explosiveness will be something that you'll just love to watch. And I think it's going to be enough to where the mistakes, you might be able to overcome it because of how many big plays he makes with his legs and his arm. And it's not like he doesn't have good decision-making skills, good pocket presence. You know, some of the things where a guy like Justin Fields did not have. A quick release, in my opinion, for a bigger guy. He's got a cannon. He is a little inaccurate, but he's not one of these guys that stares down his first read. He's not one of these guys that just tucks and runs. He's actually a pretty good overall fundamental quarterback. It's just he needs a lot of experience because he didn't play very much in college. He didn't play very much in the pros. But I'm excited to watch it. And when you think about Shane Steichen and him calling plays with that Jalen Hurts flair of Philadelphia, with one of the best offensive lines in the league, a truly elite center in Ryan Kelly, a truly elite guard in Quentin Nelson, one of the best tackle duos in the league in Raymond and Smith. And then you've got probably an improved receiving core if they get what people think Adonai Mitchell is out of Texas in the second round. He did fall in the draft, but he has a ton of skill and a ton of talent and another big outside weapon that actually can run. Michael Pittman is their number one reliable possession chain mover receiver. Josh Downs is a pretty dynamic slot guy that can go vertical or run routes inside. Alec Pierce is still there to kind of create some speed for the perimeter as well and some size. And Jonathan Taylor is back, healthy, ready to go, and could rip this season apart. Because last year, he had to deal with the whole situation, contract situation, and all that sort of stuff. So he wasn't quite the same player, almost had like a Josh Jacobs-like type of season where they were kind of slower, sluggish, felt like they were different players. Defensively, the Colts, I think, are very solid. I worry about their secondary. I think Gus Bradley runs a fundamentally sound system, puts his players in a position to succeed. Everybody kind of knows what the Colts are going to be, right? They're going to run a lot of, single high coverages, some cover one, man coverage, some cover three, press bail, zone coverages, a lot of match coverage, some quarters coverages, but it's going to be very basic, but they succeed because their pass rush is probably the best it's been under Gus Bradley in Indianapolis. That might be a little bit of a bold take, but when you look at it on paper, Samson Epikam's coming off his best season of his career. Kwity Paye is continuing to ascend as a 2021 first-round pick. Grover Stewart's a very solid interior defensive line run stuffer. They added Raekwon Davis, a former second-round pick from Miami, very solid player as well, can help rotate for Grover Stewart. DeForest Buckner is a beast in the middle. You just kind of wonder how much longer he'll be playing at that elite level of a top 5 defensive tackle. Tyquan Lewis is always a guy that I've liked. Laitu Latu could be really explosive as a rookie. I think he's going to immediately contribute with like 8 sacks this year as long as he gets on the field enough. Linebacker position, Franklin and Speed are very solid players in my opinion. The secondary, I think, I don't mind the safeties. I think Julian Blackmon's a pretty good player. Nick Cross is okay. I am worried about the corners. I think Kenny Moore is a great player, but, Juju Brents showed some flashes. Dallas Flowers, not the, kind of inconsistency. But to me, if they can bring it at the perimeter corner position, Juju Brents, if he can flash that upside as the second-round pick from 2023, and if they can figure it out in the back end, I feel like this defense could be a lot better than people think just because I think the front 7 and the pass rush is that good on paper. So they could end up being a top half unit. And if they complement a top half defense with an explosive offense, they could win 10, 11 games this year. So I do think they're underrated as a team that could squeak in the playoffs. I don't necessarily think they'll win their division because I'm just that high on the Texans. But this entire South division is extremely overlooked. And I think I have 3 of the teams in this division on my list. Just because I feel like any one of these teams could break out and they all have a different argument for doing so. So let's continue with the list. But the Colts, they certainly have the coach, the quarterback with potential, the offensive line play, the defensive line play, and then enough sprinkled around that for where they could be pretty good in 2024 and potentially very underrated. Next up, Jacksonville. Now, I mentioned how I have 3 teams in the AFC South on my list, and I'm not saying that all 3 of these teams are going to be making the playoffs or all 3 of these teams are going to win the division. That's obviously not going to happen, but I can see a world where all 3 of these different AFC South teams are like better than people think. And that might not be replicated or shown through the record of the team, but the competitiveness of the team, how close their games are, and then also like the potential of the teams. So that's what I think is really being slept on. I think the potential of the Colts is high. I think Jacksonville's potential is more so a little bit more high floor and a little bit less variance than the Colts or the other team I have on the list. But Jacksonville is just a team that I feel like a lot of people don't even bring up in a playoff sort of conversation. There's very few people that bring up Jacksonville. Maybe they've become a little bit boring, but I don't know. Whenever you have a proven head coach that's won a Super Bowl in Doug Peterson, you have a very respectable defensive coordinator in Ryan Nielsen, who comes over from the Falcons and the Saints previously to Jacksonville, which I think is going to be an upgrade for them. And you have a young quarterback that should have a very good year this year in Trevor Lawrence that has immense talent. You have a chance to do something special this year. And I wouldn't be shocked if Jacksonville had the best season of Trevor Lawrence's career, or they had the best team of Trevor Lawrence's career. And allow me to explain. So first of all, I think the offensive line could be very much improved this year. They should be healthier. And when you look at them, I think they've improved at center. Mitch Morse should provide a veteran stabilizer in the middle. Like I said with Buffalo, I don't necessarily think this is the case where Buffalo is going to miss him as much with David Edwards taking over there. But I do feel like Mitch Morse, or David Edwards, or Connor McGovern, I should say. But Mitch Morse is a guy that I just still think is a very solid center. And he's a veteran, and he can call protections, and he can help a young quarterback, and he knows how to run Doug Peterson's system and all the protections and things. So that should not be a problem, especially considering I believe Mitch Morse played in Kansas City under Andy Reid. Doug Peterson, Andy Reid crossover there in Jacksonville. Ezra Cleveland, they added kind of midway through last season, which I thought was a pretty solid pickup, and they like him. They signed him. Brandon Scherf is not what he used to be, but still solid. Anton Harrison enters year 2 as a first-round pick in 2023. You would expect him to play better this year. They did add a 4th-round pick for a layer of depth at the tackle position. Walker Little was a former 2nd-round pick. And Cam Robinson, their left tackle, is still there as a former 2nd-round pick in 2017. So they have a lot of talent on this offensive line. It's a matter of coming together and gelling together. And that was their biggest flaw last year, is they were really unable to consistently protect Trevor Lawrence. And some of that is because of the guys that I've brought up, and some of that is because of injuries that they had up front. Some of that is because of Trevor Lawrence's injuries, where he wasn't able to be as active or as mobile or as sound as he once was. But Lawrence, I think he's a good player. He needs to find rhythm, consistency, but when he's on, he's a really high-end passer and explosive player. It's just a matter of being more consistent with his play. I think what allows him to become that and do that is the receivers around him and the talent around him. Travis Etienne is an excellent explosive running back. You've got Gabe Davis, who can stretch the field. As I mentioned, not a huge Gabe Davis fan, but I do think as a 3rd or 4th option, he's fine enough. I do think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be a difference maker for them in a way that maybe Calvin Ridley couldn't be, in terms of just straight line speed and the ability to separate vertically, almost like a DK Metcalf type player. And I think he could have that impact on this offense immediately, the way that DK did for Russell Wilson. Christian Kirk is an excellent slot player. I liked Parker Washington when he got in there last year. Devin Duvernay can do a little bit of slot work and a little bit of, handoffs and things like that. Evan Ingram is basically another slot receiver and a productive player. So the offense, I think, is a little bit slept on. They've got the vertical dimension in Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. They've got that speed in Brian Thomas Jr. They got the middle of the field work with Etienne out of the backfield, Ingram at tight end, Christian Kirk at slot. They've got, a little bit of a hybrid player in Devin Duvernay. They've got a little bit of everything, right? Parker Washington's another slot receiver. So they've got a little bit of everything there, and with the rhythm of the play calling, the balance that Doug Peterson creates, typically a really good screen game. Lawrence is really good at those RPOs and bubble screens and things like that. I wouldn't be shocked if that offense was a top 10 unit in the league. And then defensively, like I said, I think Ryan Nielsen is going to take this defense to the next level. Trayvon Walker finished last year at a very high level, and I could see him continuing that success. Roy Robertson Harris and Eric Armstead are 2 6'7", 6'8" monsters in the middle of that defense. Now, Eric Armstead's got to stay healthy, but if he is what he was last year and the year previous and the year before that in San Francisco, the year before that, you're talking about a really, really good defensive line with Walker, Roy Robertson Harris, Eric Armstead, Josh Allen. That's a really good front four. Davon Hamilton there as well as a run stuffer. Devin Lloyd had a bit of a breakout last year. Alua Khan is one of the best linebackers in the league. That's a very good front seven. That's almost reminiscent of the 2017 front seven where they had, Miles Jack and Telvin Smith. They had Calais Campbell, the big man on the edge. They had Yannick Ngakoue, right? It's very reminiscent in terms of skill sets there. In that front seven. I wish they had a little bit more depth on their defensive line, but I think overall they can make that work and maybe somebody breaks out that I'm not expecting. The secondary, I don't love the, safety position outside of Andre Sisco. Andrew Wingard kind of consistently gets injured. Antonio Johnson, I'm not sure is a starter. We'll see. Ronald Darby, I do like that pickup to replace Darius Williams. I think Tyson Campbell, when he's at his best, a very good player. And Darnell Savage is interesting. They have him listed as a nickelback. I wonder if he'll play nickel or if he'll play safety, or if they'll have Jerrion Jones play nickel, because Jerrion Jones was drafted out of FSU, I believe, to be a nickel player. He played nickel in college. So I wonder if they'll move Darnell Savage to strong safety, have Andre Sisco at free safety, Jerrion Jones at nickel corner. That would make more sense to me overall. But I think the defense could be underrated, as I said, because I do respect Nielsen's scheme, and I think he could elevate the defensive line play with more kind of hybrid looks up front. The linebackers are definitely good enough in terms of blitzers, downhill run defenders. Lloyd will really feast in this defense, I think. And then Cisco, I think, could be like the Jesse Bates type that Atlanta had for Nielsen last year. Tyson Campbell could be their number one corner, shutdown guy like AJ Terrell. So looking forward to watching Jacksonville's defense this year, and if they complement their offense, which could be a top 10 unit, as I said, with a smart play caller and a good quarterback, and about above average defense, this could certainly be a playoff team. So once again, another team from the AFC South that I think could be very underrated. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't think the Raiders are going to make the playoffs this year, but if you told me the Raiders made the playoffs this season and you told me the Raiders were better than anyone expected, I would absolutely not be shocked, because you look at this roster and you look at the build and you look at the identity and you think about what this team wants to be, and it is very reminiscent of the Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell a couple of seasons ago, where they started off a little rough and then they really ran the table at the end of the year, and that catapulted them into 2023, which became an NFC Championship run. I do personally believe that the Raiders are a quarterback away from being a very, very good team. I have always, though, been a Gardner Minshew fan, and I don't think Aiden O'Connell is a bad player either, having watched him last year and honestly thinking he was better than Jimmy Garoppolo when he got in there. So I am not like a hater of either quarterback. I just feel like Gardner Minshew is what he is, and Aiden O'Connell is just a little bit lacking high-end ability for me. But I do think that he's, in year two, should be a little bit better than year one. I think he's got a good arm. I think he's got the stature, the size, the smarts to be able to play the quarterback position. He's just missing kind of mobility, different arm angles, different off-platform throws, the ability to kind of extend plays and create. He's missing that. Minshew kind of has the savviness, the creativity, the veteran savvy, the accuracy that I like. He plays with rhythm, but he is small. He doesn't have the biggest arm, and he sometimes can have very bad outings where he forces a lot of throws. But you look at this team, and I could see the foundation of them being a very good offensive line and a very good defensive line. First of all, Colton Miller is an excellent left tackle. Jackson Powers-Johnson, will he play center? Will he play guard? He was a second-round pick. They just picked the best player that was available, and I thought he was the best center in the draft. So I kind of wonder if he'll play center. I think he is a classic, power center that you would see on the Ravens or the Patriots or Josh McDaniels Raiders. I do wonder how much of that is kind of carrying over. Andre James, though, that being said, has been such a good center that it's hard for you to kind of move Andre James. Maybe Jackson Powers-Johnson can be a guard, but I kind of question that. Cody Whitehair was brought in for that. Andrus Peat could be a tackle or a guard if that doesn't work out as well. Dylan Parham is underrated, in my opinion. Munford is pretty solid as well as a big power anchor guy at right tackle. Their receivers, I think one of the most underrated receiver rooms in the league. You've got, of course, Devontae Adams, who is still a number one in my opinion. Might be a tad overrated at this point because he's probably not a top 5 receiver in the league anymore, but he's still probably top 10. That being said, and even with the weird quarterback situation last year and the difference of offenses from coach to coach, he still was producing. Jacoby Myers is one of the most reliable number 2s in the league. Had a great season for the Raiders in his first year last year. Trey Tucker's got great speed. Jalen Guyton has shown great speed. Michael Gallup could be a number 3 potentially for this offense. If you have, Adams on the outside, Gallup on the outside, Myers in the slot, that could really work pretty well in my opinion. Brock Bowers could also be, it's interesting because they could do a lot of different things. Bowers could play tight end when they go with 3 receivers, but then he could also play slot with Adams and Myers on the outside, and then you could also have Michael Mayer at tight end. So there's a lot of different things you could do there. You could do multi-tight end formations. I think Brock Bowers is going to be a stud right away. I think he's going to catch 60, 65 passes right away in this league. He's going to be a dimension after the catch. He's just a great athlete, very fluid, very smart player. Beyond his years, I think that will make him an impactful tight end right away. So having dynamic options like Adams, Myers, and Bowers, it just sets everything up. Michael Mayer is a good blocker of a tight end, but also that more inline option. Well, you could use Brock Bowers to kind of split out, play receiver, play slot, play in the backfield, do a lot of different things, play fullback. Zamir White, I don't think they're going to miss much in Josh Jacobs. Obviously, Jacobs was amazing 2 years ago, but last year, not quite. Zamir White really showed he could be a lead back last year, especially in that Chiefs game. Alexander Madison's a fine backup, as well as Amir Abdullah as a third down option. So I really like their depth chart offensively. I just kind of wish they had more at quarterback. Harrison Bryant even is a solid third tight end. If this offensive line, they can figure out the right five and the right combination, I could see them being a sneaky, effective offense with the, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, Zamir running the ball, and just good enough quarterback play could make them, I would say, a top 20 offense in the league. I do wonder about Luke Getsy, but I will say Luke Getsy, I think, got a bad rap in Chicago. I feel like there's so much pressure on him to do the right thing for Justin Fields and make Justin Fields look good. And people really didn't consider that Justin Fields wasn't really that good, right? And I would honestly say that he made Fields look good at times when he wasn't that good. So I will say that about Luke Getsy, that I thought he schemed some things up last year pretty effectively. Defensively, getting back to the point of the Raiders, this is the new Dan Campbell team led by Antonio Pierce. They're line of scrimmage led, run the ball, be physical on offense, and then defensively get to the quarterback and stop the run. And when you got Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby, that creates issues for every offensive line in the league. You're going to have to double one of those guys, and the other one is going to wreak havoc the entire game. Tyree Wilson was a high first-round pick that I believed in coming out. He was injured right off the hop last year. It's hard to really judge what he is right now, but maybe if he gets healthy, he has sky is the limit potential, and I'm looking forward to that. Malcolm Kuntz had a very productive year once they actually put him on the field last season, and he became that number 2 rusher for Max Crosby, and he started to be pretty good. I do wonder about the depth at the edge position. I'm not in love with it, but I do think Adam Butler, I've always been a huge fan of him. Shout out to him for the Patriot seasons. Adam Butler is still playing. He had some health issues in the past, but he came back to football and played really well last year. And John Jenkins is a solid, kind of run stuffer veteran. They also still have Byron Young and Matthew Butler, some players that have been drafted in recent years as depth. But I wish they maybe had one more guy that I could count on the edge to maybe take some snaps off for Max Crosby and Malcolm Kuntz. But Max Crosby pretty much plays every play, so it's kind of hard to take him off the field. Linebacker-wise, I really like their linebackers. I think they're highly underrated. Robert Spillane was on my underrated players list. I think he played amazing last year. You do wonder if he's going to do that again. But he's a great fit for this defensive scheme. By the way, Patrick Graham did an amazing job last year. He's one of the most underrated coaches in the NFL, one of the most underrated coordinators in the NFL. Diablo is that kind of athlete that Spillane isn't. Spillane kind of wins with size, power, smarts, IQ, while Diablo is more of an athlete, moves in space well. Tommy Eichenberg is a lot like Robert Spillane and can play a very similar role. They've drafted him in the 5th round. Luke Masterton has played a lot of football for them as well. And their secondary is really the unit that is most wild card-ish, most X-Factor-ish. Jack Jones is just a human X-Factor. If he's staying out of airports, he's a pretty good football player and very, very big play-oriented. He is a pick six waiting to happen. I wish he was still on the Patriots, but man, he messed that thing up completely. But man, he is a baller when he's on his game. Trayvon Moehrig and Marcus Epps make up a solid but not great safety duo. Chris Smith is also there for some depth. Jacorian Bennett has a lot of speed, but I'm not the biggest fan of him. I didn't think he played very well as a rookie. Nate Hobbs, think he's a great player. He's better in the nickel, though. I do think they could use another corner on the outside. They did draft Richardson, but I don't think he's ready to play. So maybe they could use a Stephon Gilmore type, Xavier Howard type. Those guys are still out there. They could upgrade that position if they feel like Bennett is not going to be up to the task. But with Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs, I think they've got a pretty decent corner 1-2, I would say, if Hobbs can play at that high level in the nickel position. But overall, I think the Raiders, if they get good quarterback play, if the offensive line and defensive line come together the way that you would expect, This team could be a lot more difficult to play against than people are expecting, and they could be a surprise like 9 or 10 win team if everything goes right for them. So that's why I would say they're underrated, because a lot of people think they're going to like suck this year, be worse than the Chargers, which I think they're actually more talented than the Chargers. The Broncos are really bad. I'd expect that. I'd be shocked if the Raiders were not at least third in their division, and I would not be surprised at all if they finish second. And I would not even be that surprised if they finished as the 7th seed, and were the wild card spot. So the Raiders, I think, are just a little bit more talented than people give them credit for. Next up, we've got the New York Jets. The New York Jets, I think, are underrated just because people don't take them seriously. Honestly, that's really it. I think everybody knows that the Jets are extremely talented and they have defensive talent. They have one of the best defenses in football, and they added to their offense, and their offensive line's improved, and their receiving core's improved. But this one is quite simple as to why they're on this list. People just don't take the Jets seriously as a team that can make the playoffs or as a team that can actually do something in 2024. And it saddens me because this team is super, super talented. Now, could Aaron Rodgers go down with another Achilles? Could he go down because he's fragile and old? Yes, that could certainly happen. But Aaron Rodgers, if he's healthy, is going to be solid. He might not be great. He might not be elite, but he's too smart. His arm is still too strong. And, he just knows he's Aaron Rodgers. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? He's operating at a different level at the line of scrimmage, pre-snap and post-snap, than 99.9% of quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. Never mind the game right now. There is no longer a Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers right now is the smartest quarterback that there is in the NFL when it comes to pre-snap reads, post-snap reads, decision-making. Aaron Rodgers is going to be that guy. It's just a matter of how much physical talent does he have left. And it's hard to judge the Jets based on last year because they didn't have Aaron Rodgers, and their entire offense was set up to have Aaron Rodgers. Their entire game plan was Aaron Rodgers. We're going to run Hackett's offense, which is Aaron Rodgers' offense. We're going to run sort of a basic West Coast offense. But when we run this system, it's a lot like when Peyton would run his system. It's like he knows what to check into on every play against every coverage. And based on the look that the defense gives him, he's going to check into the right play. He's going to run it. He's going to throw it. He's going to have a cover 3 beater here. He's going to have a man beater here, right? It's a lot like Peyton Manning. When that type of style. And when you have Zach Wilson and a terrible offensive line, you can't run anywhere near that offense. It just couldn't be the same, right? You had to rely on Breece Hall. You had to rely on play action, one read things. Zach's very simple-minded. He's got talent, but he can't think like Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers helps the receiving core, helps the offensive line, helps the run game because he puts them in ideal situations, whether it's by getting rid of the ball for the offensive line, getting rid of it fast, whether it's going to the right place with the ball for the receiver or the touch that he puts on the ball to protect the receiver, or it's by checking into the run at the right time against the right look and the right personnel to help Breece Hall get a better yards per carry. That is why quarterback is so important, and that's what Aaron Rodgers does at a high level, and that's what people sometimes don't really take into account about the position, and that's what Peyton did, and that's what Brady does and did. So, it's very few quarterbacks that play that way anymore, so it's hard to kind of talk about that. But to me, you look at the things around Rodgers, and you say, Breece Hall is elite. Breece Hall is elite. If you have not watched Breece Hall play, you are missing out. He is an elite running back. I really like the Braylon Allen pick. I think Braylon Allen is a big monster. I actually like the Abanikanda pick last year. Very fast, explosive player, right? So they've got some depth there. They even brought back Tariq Cohen. Hopefully he does well in the NFL once again. I used to love watching Tariq Cohen play. Aaron Rodgers, and then Tyrod Taylor is the backup for somebody kind of stable and reliable if Rodgers does miss some games. Obviously, miss every game. They're messed up anyways. They're not making the playoffs. Right? If Aaron Rodgers misses the whole year, if Aaron Rodgers has the same thing happen on Monday Night Football this year as he did last year, they're messed. They're done. They're gone. You see you later, right? Tyrod Taylor's not taking you to the playoffs. He would be better. I think he will be better than what they had last year, but still, it's not going to happen. So But Tyrod in 2 or 3 or 4 game sample, we saw how he played last year for the Giants. Not bad, right? So he can get it. He can get it done. So wide receiver core, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, that's an awesome one too. Like Garrett Wilson is a number 1 receiver in this league. I think he's like a top 15 or 16 talent in this league. That might actually be underrating him. I think he's a great great route runner. He does a great job. He has great nuance in his game. He's not the most explosive, but he'll surprise you after the catch, and he's got very good hands. I'm excited for those back shoulders and things like that. Mike Williams is the back shoulder jump catch monster, and if he's healthy, he's going to be an explosive number 2 option. And even at his worst, I could see him being like a James Jones type for Aaron Rodgers. Malachi Corley, they drafted. He's a yak monster, not the most nuanced player, but Alan Lazard is there to kind of be that slot that's more nuanced and knows where to go and beat zone coverage. And he'll be a product of Aaron Rodgers' ability to see the field, right? And that will make Alan Lazard kind of what he's always been, which is kind of like a possession receiver. Tyron Smith looks amazing already in camp, so that's a great news. I kind of was wondering, is he still the same player? Dallas kind of let him go. I kind of wonder if he's the same guy. But I think he's going to be very, very good this year for them, and that solidifies their left tackle position. Fashanu is there as well for, some depth in the first round. They picked him. So he's there when Tyron Smith undoubtedly, because he will, miss a couple games this year. He can fill in. John Simpson, solid, especially in the run game. Comes from Baltimore. Joe Tippmann, 2nd-round pick last year. They're hoping for big things this year. Elijah Vera Tucker, good right tackle, good guard as well. Very good guard. He needs to stay healthy, though. Morgan Moses always has been very steady. And the thing about Morgan Moses, he doesn't really get hurt that much. So that's a big plus for them. Tyler Conklin, reliable possession receiver. Jeremy Ruckert is there as well. I wish they were a little bit better at tight end, but Zach Kuntz they drafted last year. I wish they were a little bit better at tight end, but overall, when you have Aaron Rodgers clicking in rhythm, you've got 2 receivers that can make plays, in my opinion, and you've got different type of number 3 receivers. You've got a pretty solid run game as well. That's enough when you have arguably the best defense in the NFL. And that is, the case with the Jets. They are absolutely one of the best defenses in the NFL. They have one of the best pass rushes in the NFL, led by Quinnen Williams, a monster, one of the 3 best interior defensive linemen in the league, maybe the best interior defensive lineman in the league this year. I wouldn't be shocked now that Chris Jones has been paid. Quinnen Williams' time might be coming. Hassan Reddick is still really, really good. It wasn't long ago he had like 19 sacks in a season. Will McDonald, I really liked him coming out of the draft, and I don't think he was really able to show what he's capable of last year. Jermaine Johnson really had a nice season last year. Solomon Thomas, Michael Clemens, solid depth players as well. Javon Kinlaw they picked up. He played his best season for the 49ers that he's ever played last year, so he's ascending as well. Quincy Williams, CJ Mosley, talked about them at length. 2 of the best linebackers in the league, one of the best duos in football at that position. Sauce and DJ Reed, one of the best combos at corner in the NFL. Michael Carter, one of the more underrated corners at nickel in the NFL. Isaiah Oliver is also very solid in this system. Chuck Clark and Tony Adams at safety. I wish they were a little bit better, more dynamic at safety. Maybe they could still pick somebody up. But, this team is very, very talented, very, very complete. You almost wonder about, can Rodgers stay healthy, and how good will the coaching be? And those are really the only questions they have, other than the questions that everyone has, which is just health, right? With the offensive line, the age of the offensive line, and then the defense, can they stay healthy and together? But if they do, this team on paper is a playoff team, and people are not treating them with the respect that they deserve on paper. And maybe that's just the Jets thing where people need to see it before they believe it. But to me, man, this team, if they don't make the playoffs, it would be a significant disappointment. And the only reason I would let it slide is because Aaron Rodgers got hurt. That's the only reason. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy and plays 17 games and they don't make the playoffs, this will be a disaster class of probably coaching and management and football. Just disaster, right? They've got way too much talent. They've got way too good of a roster to not make the playoffs this year, to not maybe win a playoff game this year. And if they make the playoffs, they could be very dangerous because of the style they'll play. They're going to be a defensive team in January when holding is allowed, when clutching and grabbing is allowed, when being a little bit more physical and chippy is allowed. And the Jets will be able to run the ball, and they'll be able to play in cold weather because they're from New York. And they're a defensive team. And they're one of the best pass defenses in football. And who will they be playing in the playoffs compared to other teams, right? They'll have a pass defense when they play the Chiefs. They'll have a pass defense when they play the Bills. They'll have a pass defense when they play the Bengals. They'll have a pass defense when they play the Texans, right? The Ravens. So the Jets are, to me, a very dangerous team this year. The Seattle Seahawks are the next underrated team in the NFL that I want to discuss, and I think it begins with the coaching adjustments and the hires that they've made. Mike Macdonald, first and foremost, is, to me, like, probably my favorite hire of the offseason overall. I really like Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers, but I think that's more for a culture and long-term thing. I could see Mike Macdonald immediately having an impact with Seattle, turning that defense around and getting the best defensive play we've seen from Seattle in years. I don't really know what to make of Ryan Grubb. Like, I really liked what he did at Washington, but it was college. It was a college scheme, things like that. But I really could see Mike Macdonald being the next, like, Mike McDaniel, but of defense sort of deal. I'm not going to quite go to the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan type of level, but I could see a Mike McDaniel type of approach where, yeah, they got rid of a good coach like Flores, for example, for Miami, Pete Carroll in Seattle. Pete Carroll was a little bit past his prime, a little bit past it in the NFL, in my opinion, especially his defense. And he wasn't really no longer providing that schematical edge that he once did. He was still a great motivator, still great with the team, still great for culture, still a Hall of Fame coach, in my opinion. But Mike Macdonald is going to bring that scheme edge to the defensive side that is very much needed, especially in this division and the NFC. And a good defense could really make this team a playoff team because the offense is explosive. They might be a little bit inconsistent, but their talent should be able to create enough explosive plays to where having a very solid defense will make them a playoff team. Because, I don't even really care, right, what Ryan Grubb ends up doing with this team. Because with Geno, who's probably like a top 17 quarterback in the league, he's played at times like a top 12 quarterback in the league. With DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Noah Fant, and Kenneth Walker, you can only mess things up so much. Like, they're going to make plays, right? They're going to be able to create big runs, big passing plays, and that with a good defense in this conference, that's 9, 10, 11 wins to me, right? Now, the offensive line is concerning to a certain degree. Charles Cross hopefully could stay healthy. He's probably like their best tackle they got. Abraham Lucas, a bit up and down last year or two, right? He played, rookie year wasn't bad. It was actually pretty good. But year two was a little bit hit and miss, and injuries have been an issue with their tackles. The interior, I am not a fan of. I think Lincoln Tomlinson is washed. I don't really know much about the center, and Anthony Bradford has never really been a great player. So I'm definitely concerned about the interior. There's no question about it. But there must be something with Ryan Grubb and his protection plan and the scheme that they feel like these players are uniquely suited. You never know that the coaching could make these players better. That's what I'm saying, right? Scheme can do a lot, especially for offensive line play and cohesion of an offensive line. But when you have three receivers that are really talented and can separate, and you have a running back that can make people miss and make explosives out of nothing, that's a good start. And then you've got Zach Charbonnet, who's a very solid number 2. Sam Howell, who's a really good backup quarterback in this league, right? Pharaoh Brown, I thought played great for my Patriots last year as a blocking tight end. Like that pickup quite a bit. So Christian Haynes, they drafted. Nick Harris started for the Browns a little bit last year, I believe. George Fant's been all over the NFL as a swing tackle. So they've got decent depth on the offensive line. But the defense, right? Like after we get over the offense, having great receivers, Geno, he could be bombs away. That's the one thing that I think they're clearly going for here is run and throw down the field. Like vertical spread offense, spread the defense out, quick decision making. You know, the offensive line won't have to hold up that long because Geno's going to have the ball out of his hand, right? And that's what I think Ryan Grubb is aiming for here. What he did at Washington, where Michael Penix was a pocket quarterback. He'd get that football. And Geno is really good from the pocket. He moves in the pocket really well. He has that subtle movement to his game. He's got a stronger arm than you would think. He's accurate. He's a little bit too mechanical. I would like to see a little bit more creativity to his game. But when he's like in that machine mode, he's very, very good. The one thing I would say is sometimes he's too aggressive. But if that's the offensive attack, he should go with it, and it will be a good suit for him. I think that him and Howell are both similar in their goods and their bads. I think both of them suit this offense very, very well, where if it's spread, if it's vertical based, I think they'll feast. DK Metcalf should have a huge year. So looking forward to the offense again. But the defense, I think, is being slept on across the board by 99% of people. I think the defensive line here is one of the best defensive lines, especially the interior. I'm not talking about the edge, but the interior defensive line is one of the best in the NFL. You draft Byron Murphy in the first round, who I think right away might not be Jalen Carter, but I think he's going to be really, really good right away. Okay, Leonard Williams is really, really good and has been his entire career. Jerron Reed, pretty good pass rusher. Draymond Jones, pretty good pass rusher and a good player. Jonathan Hankins, great signing. He was a good player for the Cowboys the last couple of years against the run. And when he was out, they really missed him. So that rotation of about 5 interior defensive linemen and mix and matching those, that's a really good interior defensive line when you have, you know, Mike McDonald, a guy that needs a good interior D-line to stop the run and to set up his edge rushers for stunts and pressures. And that's what he did in Baltimore, right? They were interior defensive line driven with Justin Madubuike, and the edge wasn't really like dynamic. They had the number 1 defense in the league, and they had Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy on the edge, right? These are older guys that are not exactly TJ Watt, right? So Boye Mafe, I think, is pretty good. Uchenna Nwosu 2 years ago was really, really good for them, and I really like how those two fit in this defense. Darrell Taylor's solid. Derek Hall, second-round pick in 2023, has talent. The linebackers, I like what they did with Jerome Baker, fits that downhill blitzing scheme he did with Flores. I think he will with Mike McDonald. I could see him playing a Pat Queen type role. And Tyrell Dodson, I think, is going to be more of like the Roquan Smith type. A little bit smaller, but moves really well, right? And was like, I think, PFF's number 1 graded linebacker last year. So their front 7 is highly underrated. And if they stay healthy, I think that McDonald is going to put these pieces together. Devin Witherspoon, I think, could have a massive year as the nickel corner of this defense, playing a lot like the Kyle Hamilton. He is a sledgehammer of a tackler. He can play man. He can play zone. He will get in there against the run. Michael Jackson, I think, is underrated as a perimeter corner. I could see him being, you know, one of those big outside corners like the Ravens had. I'm blanking on the name of who I'm thinking of. Stevens. That's kind of the mold of Michael Jackson, right? Right there. Same as Reek Woolen. But Reek Woolen, you know, I could see both those guys playing on the outside. Reek Woolen, you're hoping could be like the Marlon Humphrey of this defense. Rayshawn Jenkins, Julian Love, I don't think are quite the caliber of Marcus Williams and all that. But Love is a good player. He can do pretty much everything, play in any defense, any spot, free safety, strong safety. Rayshawn Jenkins, I think, has always been a bit underrated. Kayvon Wallace is, I mean, you know, a nickel / safety type. Kobe Bryant, same sort of deal. Hybrid possibilities with him. So I think the Seahawks defense on paper is underrated, and I think they will be underrated all year. And then the offense, I worried about the offensive line, but otherwise, I think they're going to be a team that, I'm going to say it in this video, I think I'll end up picking the Seahawks making the playoffs. I really like how they look on paper, and I think they've got the makings of a playoff team this year. So I think Mike Macdonald putting these pieces together, there was already talent in Seattle. It's a matter of molding it from the darkness, as Bane once did, and bringing it to the football field. All right. Next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still underrated. I once upon a time picked the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers without anybody knowing their entire secondary, right? I once upon a time picked Tom Brady to just walk onto the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and for that team to win the Super Bowl, and it happened. It happened in year one, and ever since then, I've been in love with this team. But once again, people are sleeping on the Bucs, and this roster and this general manager, Jason Light, who I think continues to be one of the best in the NFL at replenishing a roster and creating a talented pool of players for his coaches. And Todd Bowles, I think, is a very good defensive coach. I still don't think he's a great head coach, but man, he had a good season last year. And I think Tampa Bay, the biggest thing that people sleep on, I think, is Baker Mayfield. Like, Baker Mayfield's a baller, and Baker Mayfield is a leader. And Baker Mayfield is a guy that is never going to say die. Baker is going to lay it on the field, and he is going to rip it, right? And when Baker's playing, Baker is playing. Like, Baker can get hot, and he can be really good. And last year, I felt like he was a good player last year. And I think, just probably one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the league based on what he did last season. And you look at this offense, and there's really no reason besides the offensive coordinator change from Dave Canales to Liam Cohen, who is also a Rams guy at heart, right, from Sean McVay and that staff. There's no reason why this offense should not be as good or better than last year. They still got Rachaad White. They still got the ageless Mike Evans. They still have Chris Godwin, who honestly should be better this year, removed from injury. Trey Palmer is still there. They just signed Sterling Shepard, who maybe can still play, maybe not. Jalen McMillan, they added, who I like Jalen McMillan from Washington, right? You've got Baker. They added Bucky Irving as maybe a third down back. They've kind of been looking for this out of Chase Edmonds, right, from last year. They tried it in Giovanni Bernard. That didn't work out. Sean Tucker is very, very, very explosive. If he can get to his game, I could see him being pretty good. The offensive line added a first-round pick at the center position. Their worst position for the last 2 years has been center. Robert Hainsey was 32nd in PFF grade last year, and he was not much better in 2022. And the interior offensive line for Brady in 2022 was a disaster. They couldn't block. They couldn't run the ball. They were historically bad at running the ball, right? And I think they've gotten better since then. Like, Cody Mock helped with that. Luke Gedeke evolved and became a pretty good tackle in the zone blocking system. Tristan Wirfs is one of the best offensive linemen in the league, and Ben Bredesen is a solid player as well. So, and then they still got Hainsey as a backup. To me, the O-line looks a lot better. If Graham Barton is as good as I think he is, this O-line could be exponentially better. The receiving core is a bit deeper, in my opinion. Cade Otton is still there at tight end, and Baker's still there. So to me, the offense should be as good, if not better, as long as the play calling is about the same, which it should be in theory because it's very similar ideas, very similar system. The defense, I could see how they could be better or worse in different ways. I think just removing Devin White from the defense is a positive from a subtraction, right? Like, KJ Britt, I think, is a lot better than people will recognize or understand. Unless you've watched him play, you wouldn't really know because he's not like a big name or anything. But when he played last year, I thought he was very, very solid and a lot more reliable than Devin White. Devin White had freaky moments, but he was also really, really bad at other moments. The interior defensive line is low-key, like, excellent. With Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, especially in year 2, that's one of the best combinations in the league. Logan Hall enters year 3, where he should be a little bit better this year. Greg Gaines is solid. William Golston is still around, still solid. The edge rotation, I wish they had a true number 1 pass rusher, and I'd be all in on them winning the division. Yaya Diaby could become that. but I don't think they currently have that. I think Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has never really become it yet, and I don't expect him to. Anthony Nelson is a solid run defender from the edge. The secondary is a bit suspect, but actually when you think about it, yeah, they did lose Carlton Davis, who's a loss, but Zion McCollum improved last year. Christian Izine was on my underrated players list. Tavier Thomas has been underrated his entire career. Jordan Whitehead is going to help them at safety and be another kind of role player in terms of being like a linebacker, safety hybrid. Tyke Smith could also help them in the back end in the third round. And of course, they still have Jamel Dean. They also signed Randy Gregory for the edge rush. That could help them with explosiveness. And Chris Braswell from Alabama, I was also a pretty big fan of in the draft. Levante David is still holding things together. But with Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, Levante David, Antoine Winfield, who's a stud, Jamel Dean, they've got enough pieces there at a high level where you're like, yeah, with Todd Bowles coaching this, with the different blitzes they bring, they're still going to be pretty dynamic on defense. They're always good against the run. They'll put you in bad situations. They'll force turnovers. So the Bucs, overall as a roster, just underrated. People are thinking that they're going to miss the playoffs. The Falcons are a lock to win the division. The Saints are better than the Bucs. I would say no, not so fast. I think the Bucs still are just as good as the Falcons, if not better. And in my opinion, they've got a much higher floor than the Falcons, given Kirk Cousins' injury. And I think they've got a much better defense than the Falcons. And I think arguably their offense is just as good on paper. Like maybe they don't have the same offensive line or potential as the Falcons do on offense, but you would expect if their offense is as good as it was last year, that's a top 12 offense in the league last year. So yeah, I think the Bucs are just really underrated because everyone isn't thinking they can do it again, but I think they can. The division isn't very good. And the final underrated team in the NFL is the Tennessee Titans. I said 3 teams from the AFC South was in this video and were in this video. And there are. The Titans are that team that I think I have them projected for, and you guys have seen my record prediction, so there's no way I can lie here. I projected them for 6 or 7 wins. And you're saying, Mitch, how could you have a 6 or 7 win team underrated? Well, I just think that their ceiling is underrated. Like, I think the Titans could be a playoff team. I think the Titans could make the wild card. I think the Titans could be a lot better than people think they can be. But I just don't know if I'm willing to predict it, right? There's a difference between kind of going through the theory of the possibility and then predicting that to happen, right? So when I see the Titans, I see a team that improved their offensive line, wide receiving core, and defensive backfield. I also think they've improved their offensive coaching, their offensive line coaching, their play calling, right? And then you would argue, okay, quarterback play in year 2 for Will Levis should be better. So all those things should be improved. And they won 7 games last year, 6 or 7 games last year. So just, going through that process on top of seeing some of the high-end talent they have on the perimeter, it gets you very excited for the possibilities of this team. If Will Levis is a solid to good quarterback, this could be a team that wins 10 games. Because they've got a backfield with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. Very good 1-2. Okonkwo is very athletic at tight end. They've got a plethora of receivers. Calvin Ridley, who I'm excited for, in another year removed from the suspension, should be even better than last year. D-Hop can still play as a good number 2 receiver. Tyler Boyd is still a number 3 receiver. Treylon Burks has flashed big potential. Westbrook-Akine is better than a 5th receiver, right? Kyle Phillips is better than a 6th receiver. Then you look at J.C. Latham with Peter Skoronski. That could be really dangerous and a lot of fun to watch, especially in the run game. You've got Callahan coaching that offensive line of young players that he could really get the potential out of them as one of the best, if not the best, offensive line coach in the league. Lloyd Cushenberry was one of the best centers in the league last year. They just signed him. Daniel Brunskill's one of the most underrated guards in the league. Yeah, they have a problem at right tackle, but you can always, with a good left tackle, you can always help towards the right, especially if you have a good left guard on top of that and Peter Skoronski. So I don't know. The Titans offense could be a lot of fun to watch. Very explosive, very balanced. And then I'm intrigued to see what Brian Callahan can bring with the offense with Nick Holtz as well. But it should be better than last year. I mean, the Titans have not had good play calling on offense since Arthur Smith, in my opinion. So they've been missing that for years. Mike Vrabel was one of the best game managers in the league, but he was more of a defensive guy and more of a game manager, head coach, motivator. He was not an offensive guy. So this team should be more offensive minded, and that should lead to more points. And looking at the personnel, they are much better. Last year they entered the year with nothing on offense, basically, other than Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins. They really didn't have much. And the offensive line was putrid. Defensively, Jeffrey Simmons is there to really be that stud in the middle of their defense. Harold Landry at his best is a good player. Arden Key is a solid player. I am worried about the contributors on the defensive line around Jeffrey Simmons. I'm worried about the linebackers. These are worries that I've discussed before where I could see the holes in their defense. But then when you look at the secondary, they potentially have one of the best cover units in the league, led by L'Jarius Sneed in that trade, Roger McCreary at nickel, who is on my underrated list, Chidobe Awuzie, who's a very good number 2, Elijah Molden, and Amani Hooker at safety. So if those guys stay healthy, that's a very good cover unit, and you could then become pretty creative with what you do up front, which Denard Wilson, he is one of those coaches that I believe is going to be pretty creative in the things that he'll do. Denard Wilson was with the Jets. He's a defensive back coach, right? So he likes having that strong defensive back type of secondary. And then I believe he was with the Ravens, if I'm not mistaken. He spent 2 seasons with Philadelphia, 2021, 2022. And then, was he with the Ravens last year? Yes. So he could bring a lot of different flavors to the table. He was with Philadelphia when they went to the Super Bowl, and they historically broke a record of sacks. And then in 2023, he was with the best defense in the NFL and one of the forefront thinkers of the game that I just discussed, Mike Macdonald. So he could really elevate a lot of these players, especially with that secondary he has, right? So the Titans are really interesting. That's all I'm saying, guys. They're really interesting. I think not enough people are talking about the potential of this team. If Will Levis hits, this team will hit, in my opinion. Gronk spiked the like button. 100 likes for the most overrated teams in the NFL. I didn't expect this video to actually be this long, but thank you guys so much for watching. I guess I had a lot to say. Peace.